How could someone trusted, loved, and even adored become the worst kind of monster? He was charming, charismatic, someone you'd want by your side. Yet beneath his charming smile, Robert Fisher harbored dark, twisted desires. Desires that led him to commit a crime so horrific that the very thought of it sends chills down your spine. It was a seemingly normal evening on July 6, 2023, when Laquesha Stewart, just like any other night, left her daughter Josie in the care of her boyfriend Robert. Little did she know that when she left for Walmart, she was unknowingly leaving her daughter with a predator. Today's episode of our true crime story is a case of betrayal and horror, a cautionary story that must be heeded to prevent further tragedy. Robert Fisher was a normal guy, and his sister lived right next to Laquesha Stewart's apartment. Robert was a handsome, promising young man, and Laquesha Stewart found him attractive. Robert Fisher thinks she is beautiful and would add meaning to his life, so immediately they hang out, and pretty soon he assumes the boyfriend role. This is such a happy time in his life, and because she enjoys his company so much, she invites him over just over a week after she met him, and a few days prior to after she crowned him her latest boyfriend. The signs were not there. He was seen to be a loving man, but what he did is the worst thing that could ever happen to a 3-year-old. Now, Josefina Cunningham, who was also called Josie, was born on July 25, 2019. She was just 3 years old and lived with her mother in Rensselaer, New York. She had 3 older brothers, Jaquan Stewart, James, and Conway Cunningham. Her dad, Joseph Cunningham, didn't live with Laquesha, her mother, under the same roof. Josie was described as fun, loving, intelligent, and a smart young girl. She was born prematurely and had a hole in her heart, but because she was tough, she healed up in no time and bounced back stronger than ever before. Her ambition was to be a firefighter before her dream got cut short. She enjoyed the company of her brother Jaquan Stewart. Stewart said Josie will always sing her favorite children tune all the time while he was around. She had a lovely, broad smile. Josie's teachers fondly remembered her vibrant personality and imaginative play at daycare. She would often assume the role of teacher, carefully arranging baby dolls and engaging in nurturing activities like reading and feeding them. This sweet gesture showcased her innate caring nature and affectionate spirit. Her family and caregivers described Josie as a girly girl, reflecting her love for feminine interests and playful charm. These cherished memories paint a vivid picture of a young life filled with promise, laughter, and joy, tragically cut short. Robert Fisher saw all these, and as a disturbed monster, he pounced at the only opportunity Laquesha trusted him to be alone with Josie, and enjoyed the most sickening affair. On the night of July 6, 2023, Laquesha headed to Walmart, and of course Robert was home alone babysitting Josie. Laquesha returned home from Walmart at about 8 p.m. She loved her daughter so much, and it was routine to always check on her before she herself went to bed. On this night, she was cuddled up and covered with a blanket, sleeping peacefully on her bed. Before she went to bed, she took her medication and blew her lover a goodnight kiss. In the middle of the night, she stretched her hands in old fashion, ready to feel the warmth of his body close to hers, and maybe even get a cuddle. But he wasn't there. She got up and made her way to the living room and found him on the couch, stark naked. She wasn't one who's asked many questions, so she covered him with a towel while he was scrolling through his phone and went back to sleep. On the morning of 7th July 2023, Laquesha went to her daughter's room to wake her up, but found her lying lifeless in her bed, refusing to responding to taps and earnest call out by her. She panicked and reached out to emergency services immediately. Josefina was taken to First Albany Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead. Rensselaer Police Department, led by Chief Warren Familietti, said in a media coverage response, When our initial responders arrived at the scene and made contact with Josefina, she was described as being laid in bed, on her back, with her hand folded across her torso as if she was staged. What happened in that room? What had Robert Fisher done? Robert's attempt to cover his tracks was chilling. Detectives soon uncovered the horrifying details. He had crushed Laquesha's medication, alprazolam and olanzapine, into a sippy cup, forcing Josie to drink it before the night took its dark turn. These drugs, mixed together, rendered her unconscious, making her vulnerable. But what came next was even worse. In the stillness of the night, Robert crept into Josie's room, knowing she would be asleep, helpless. What he did next is beyond comprehension. He took advantage of that vulnerable moment, committing an act of horror that no child should ever face. Afterward, he tried to erase his crime, wiping Josie's face and body with Clorox wipes, thinking he could mislead investigators. But the truth was too strong to hide. Detectives say his motive was to take away suspicion of sexual assault, so his motive was to exonerate himself and walk free. She had blue spots on her face, and this skin discoloration was due to the wipes. She was covered in blood and was foaming from the mouth. The sheets in which she lay on was also covered with blood as well. Robert, who stepped out before Laquesha reached out to 911, tried to re-enter the apartment while the sleuthing process was still taking place. His interference with the ongoing investigation made him to be charged immediately with obstruction of justice. And after a shocking revelation, he was charged with rape and murder of the 3-year-old on the spot of the investigation. He was then brought in for questioning. It gets worse because she bled far too much, and there are no words to describe her pain, even though she wasn't conscious. Subsequently, as the search for more answers was presently happening, the detectives found bloody baby shark sheets, Robert's underwear, which was covered in blood, and also countless towels are found, soaked in Josefina's blood. Countless towels. This is beyond horror. The hospital who examined her body determined the cause of her death was due to sexual assault and acute intoxication by the combined effect of the drugs she was made to take. As the events unraveled, Laquesha came to the understanding that when she woke up in the middle of the night to find him naked, sitting on the couch, he was trying to erase pictures after the atrocious deed. Josefina Stewart always had a hunch that Robert Fisher was on to no good and always felt uneasy about his presence, even for the short time he got in contact with him. He said, "Something felt a little off when I first met him. It was a little off. I just felt something in my guts. I never saw my mom with a white guy. Maybe that's why. But I never spoke to her about her relationship. It was like she was hypnotized. She was too deep in love with him. It was actually kind of strange." His uneasiness grew in leaps and bounds when he discovered he associated with a known sex offender. Following the death of Josefina, it sparks a lot of criticisms and opinions, and a lady, Marianne Moses, came out to confirm that Robert's act was not unlikely. She narrated how she helped him and gave him a temporary place to stay in her home back in 2021 after he had just gotten paroled after an attempted burglary charge. She said she thought he was finally on track, so she was compassionate. But she noticed a strange character in him. He was trying to corner a child in her custody, and before he could violate any of the children in her care, she stopped him and called the police. He was removed from her apartment that same day. Although, before he was charged with rape and murder of Josefina Cunningham, he had no sex-offending-related crime in his record. But due to the traumatizing manner in which he carried out the murder and rape of Josie, the police believe this is not his first time, and they believe he had just not been caught. This means that there are other victims of Robert's child molestation and probable murder. Robert Fisher denied the charges of obstruction of justice, rape, and murder of young Josie. However, weeks after his first court appearance, just 2 weeks before his trial, he agreed to a plea deal offered by the prosecution. Robert Fisher was sentenced to 20 years to life in Rensselaer County Court. He was convicted of raping and killing 3-year-old Josie. The courtroom was filled with an eerie silence as Assistant District Attorney Antonia Edwards delivered a powerful statement highlighting the horrific nature of Fisher's crimes. Edwards emphasized that the community deserved to know the truth about Fisher's vile acts, which took Josie's life and inflicted unimaginable horror on her. Fisher, who pleaded guilty to murder in the second degree, showed no emotion during the sentencing. Judge Deborah Young handed down a severe sentence to Robert Fisher, condemning him to 20 years to life for second-degree murder and 20 years with 20 years post-release supervision for second-degree rape to run concurrently. This plea agreement spared Josie's family the ordeal of a trial and ensured Fisher's accountability. District Attorney Mary Pat Donnelly emphasized that the agreement prioritized protecting the family from further trauma and uncovering the truth about Fisher's heinous acts. Judge Young's words were scathing. "You are a threat to society. You show no remorse for what you did to Josie." She declared Fisher unfit to rejoin society, urging future parole panels to thoroughly review court records before considering his release. Young's statement served as a powerful condemnation of Fisher's crimes, ensuring he faces justice for the devastating harm inflicted on Josie and her loved ones. The sentence reflects the gravity of Fisher's actions, prioritizing public safety and honoring Josie's memory. Robert Fisher, the convicted murderer and rapist, remained silent when given the opportunity to speak, simply responding with a quiet no. His defense attorney, Lucas Mahuta, represented him in the courtroom, which was packed with Josie's family, law enforcement officials, and other community members. Rensselaer Police Chief Warren Familietti didn't mince words when describing Fisher, calling him an evil individual with a long history of devastating those around him. This statement came during a news conference held immediately after Fisher's sentencing. Josie's funeral was a somber affair. Friends, family, and a community, reeling from grief, gathered to say their goodbyes. Though the justice system had done its part, nothing would ever replace the innocence that had been stolen from this bright, beautiful child. Her family would never forget. The family of Josie were unsatisfied about the sentence given to Robert Fisher and wanted the death penalty. They believed the crime was heinous enough and deserving of the death penalty. Josefina Stewart said in an interview with the press that he believes Robert Fisher took the plea deal in order to evade recounting the experience during trial in court and called him a coward. He wanted the trial experience to occur so that the whole world will know how these pedophiles get trusted and how they perpetrate this evil, hoping new laws could be made to curb the menace. Josefina Stewart said, "I want him to pay for what he did. I want him to get the death penalty. People that commit these crimes need to pay. They need to get the death penalty. This crime was really heinous. It was really heinous. I want the world to see they need to be in shock. They need to know. They can't be doing stuff like this." However, just months after pleading guilty and being sentenced to 20 years to life, Robert Fisher, 34, the convicted murderer and rapist, was pronounced dead at 1:50 a.m. on October 22, 2024, at Elmira Correctional Facility, according to the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. Fisher had been incarcerated since September 23, 2024. The cause of Fisher's death remains unknown, as authorities decline to provide further information. Rensselaer Police Chief Warren Familietti took to Facebook to address the death of convicted murderer Robert Fisher. He acknowledged the widespread relief and joy expressed by many on social media, tactfully sidestepping any personal opinion. Familietti instead focused on the dedication of investigators, saying, I want to acknowledge the tireless efforts of the men and women who worked tirelessly to bring justice to Josie and her family. It appears that justice was ultimately served by a power much greater. He concluded with a heartfelt message. I hope that all people affected by this horrific crime can now begin the next step of the healing process. Laquesha, forever haunted by the loss of her daughter, is left to rebuild her life. The haunting questions of what she could have done differently will stay with her forever as she faces the public scrutiny and the weight of the truth. What we are witnessing here is more than just the horrific end of a child's life. It's a story about trust and the terrifying consequences when that trust is betrayed. At the heart of this case lies the shocking reality that the monster was not a stranger, but someone who had woven himself into the fabric of Josie's life, someone she should have been safe with. It's hard to fathom that Robert Fisher, this seemingly charming normal man, was capable of such unspeakable actions. How could he manipulate the very person who trusted him the most? And yet, there are red flags that can't be ignored. What would have happened if those around him had seen through his facade earlier? Would Josie still be here today? But this story isn't just about the horrors of the crime itself. It's about the haunting reality that this could have been anyone's child. Josie was not just a statistic. She was vibrant, with a world full of potential, until her innocence was cruelly stolen. Her family, forever torn by grief, now lives with the painful questions of what they could have done to protect her. For Laquesha, for Jaquan, for every family affected, the emotional toll of this betrayal is something they will carry for the rest of their lives. In the end, justice may have been served in the form of a conviction, but it feels almost insufficient for the depth of loss here. Even as Robert Fisher faces his punishment, the question remains: how many more lives will be shattered before we realize the monsters that hide in plain sight? And more critically, how do we ensure this never happens again? Also, as we look at Robert Fisher's sentencing, one can't help but feel that justice falls short. For the brutal rape and murder of a 3-year-old, the 20 years to life sentence seems inadequate, given the unimaginable harm caused. And then, just months after his sentencing, Robert Fisher is found dead in prison under mysterious circumstances. Was it a final escape from the consequences of his actions, or is it another twist in a story that leaves us questioning whether true justice was ever really served? The weight of this crime lingers, leaving Josie's family and all of us wondering if the system truly holds the guilty accountable. Could more have been done, or was this the best we could expect? The scar left behind by this crime will forever be one of heartbreak. And as we turn the page on this chapter, we must remember Josie not for her tragic end, but for the life she should have had, filled with laughter, love, and endless possibility. If this chilling case sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping true crime stories. It's important that we remember the victims and the horrors they've faced. Stay vigilant, protect the ones you love, and keep raising awareness.